what's old is new and still quite relevant here in 2022, and it runs great on Windows 10. This is F1 Challenge 99-02, developed by ImageSpace Incorporated and published by EA Sports. In my opinion, this is kind of where modern sim racing began. Grand Prix Legends always had a niche cult following. The Papyrus NASCAR games always had a massive community of modders who made new car skins throughout the season. But this is where things really came together as a complete package, because F1 Challenge 99-02 is essentially two games in one. It is a fully licensed, fully featured F1 simulator that you can just install and play and have a lot of fun with, but it's also a modder's paradise. You can just crack it open and start messing with shit in simple INI text files. And you can very quickly turn it into a sports car racing simulator, a Group C prototype racing simulator. And once the community started really exploring the boundaries of what they could do in F1 Challenge, that essentially created modern sim racing. People's F1 Challenge installs would balloon to several gigabytes in size and feature all different types of mods beyond Formula One cars that it dictated the next 20 years of the sim racing industry, as what developers ended up doing is they tried to replicate the experience of ballooning your F1 Challenge install with a ton of different mods featuring everything from touring cars to GT cars to prototypes as a retail product, so you didn't have to go out and hunt for mods. R Factor, for example, is just updated, rewritten F1 Challenge code with unlicensed cars. Automobilista 1, just F1 Challenge with updated code and historic F1 cars. Race 07 and GTR Evolution, again, just F1 Challenge, albeit with a bunch of different touring cars and sports cars. And I could go on like this throughout, the past 20 years of sim racing. Even the Project Cars series of games, even Automobilista 2, even stuff like NASCAR 08 and NASCAR 09 on the Xbox 360, all have their roots in this game right here. And while there are definitely AI issues here and there and weird physics gremlins here and there, what this game has always done extremely well is top level open wheel cars. So that's what we're going to do today. Full distance race, the 2000 Australian Grand Prix, the Albert Park Grand Prix circuit, 58 laps. Difficulty is at 101%, aggression is at 35%. I rolled off P6 as Rubens Barrichello, and I actually do have a setup for this race. There is still a Discord for F1 Challenge 99-02 fans where they share really nice stuff like season texture updates, so I can have the Marlboro logo on the car. They have car setups for every single track in the game. They have a 4 GB patch. They have a special 3D setup tool, so you can run the game in ultra wide like I'm doing right here, which looks great. And it allows me to play one of the most important games ever released in the genre's history, in the industry's history, upscaled and remastered for modern hardware. And this was just genuinely a lot of fun. Probably the most fun I've had sim racing in quite a long time. 90 minutes turning laps around Albert Park in a 20-year-old game, and it's really as if time has stood still. And that's kind of an exciting thing, not just from a nostalgia standpoint and the quirkiness of being able to play an old racing game on modern hardware, but for some of the drivers in this field. Time has not been kind to some of the folks, especially to the driver of the red Ferrari car currently leading the field. Schumacher, of course, suffered a debilitating injury in 2013. Michael Schumacher is not the same person he used to be. In this game, however, his legacy is preserved, and he's tearing everyone a new asshole right now, which is how it should be and how everyone wants to remember him. A game like this isn't really just a game or a racing sim, as some of the more nitpicky guys will say in the comments, but it's a time capsule, really. And regardless of what happens to Schumacher's health over the next couple of years, because he is getting a bit old, at any given time we can boot this game up, and Michael is still there to kick our ass, which is how it should be. So, after 90 minutes spent tearing around Albert Park at race pace, a lot of you guys are probably wondering how this thing drives, considering this is the grandfather of pretty much all modern racing sims on the market. This is a hard question to answer. It's going to get really weird and convoluted. So when I first installed this about 2 weeks ago, it took me a solid evening to get used to it. And this is because sim racing at this period of time, from the late 90s to the early 2000s, was in just a really weird place. Grand Prix Legends in 1998 shipped with really bad default setups that bottomed out in the middle of the corner. So as you'd be going through, a medium speed corner and the car was compressed, it would just snap loose on you and you had no idea what the fuck happened. This was actually a genuine bug slash issue with GPL, but it ended up influencing a lot of different sims that came out at the time. Papyrus had done so much research into tires and vehicle dynamics that a lot of different devs in the industry basically took their word for it and based their physics engine and their tire model on what GPL was doing, which meant wrecking loose in the middle of the corner. They were trying to insinuate that big, sticky rubber tires had no such thing as lateral grip, which is something we now know to be absolutely false. Yet, we didn't really know that at the time. We didn't have a lot of feedback from real drivers, so a lot of racing sims from this era have a tendency to just snap loose and wreck loose through the center of a corner if you carry even slightly too much speed. So yeah, F1 Challenge 99-02 has this problem, as does I believe the original GTR. It was fixed for GTR2, and the story basically goes that Ian Bell, after he made his millions from GTR, bought himself a Ferrari, took it to a track day at Silverstone while developing GTR2, and was surprised at how easy he could just tune it around and, get out of control and recover the slide, really without much effort, and that kind of ushered in the new age of thinking regarding tire models in sim racing and how forgiving and self-aligning a real car is. F1 Challenge, like I said, it's a problem in this game. It's a lot to learn how to drive these cars. You have to really slow down your hand inputs, especially when entering a corner. You have to run a lot more forward bias than you'd think, and you have to just really underdrive the car, because if you get any slip at all in these tires, you are fucking gone. And what's really interesting, I've been running in a sim racing system series with the Ferrari F2004 and AC, and of course, with modern tire technology and tire research that Kunos have done, you can charge the corner, you can wheel it off the corner, you can hang the ass end out, you can trim the car out for qualifying and get away with all sorts of crazy shit, and white knuckle the thing around the track in Q trim, and it's a completely unforgettable driving experience. This game, you're just pussyfooting around the track. That being said, I did eventually figure it out. The setups I downloaded, as a setup pack from Discord, definitely made things a little bit easier. The car is more compliant under load and doesn't want to snap as easily, but it's still there, and you still have to underdrive it for a lot of the time you're on the track. The one positive, even though it's not super realistic, of course, is that it's not exhausting to drive this car, or this era of cars, as it would be in a modern sim, because you can't just push and push and push. You can very quickly overdrive them, so you end up running the entire race at 80% attack, which it's really weird, don't get me wrong, and it's inaccurate, and it's not really how these cars actually drove, but in terms of the mental fatigue that comes with sim racing, I'm just on a Sunday drive right here. This race ended up being, I think, either 85 or 87 minutes long, and it went by absolutely nothing because I just wasn't tired, because I didn't have to push the whole time. It was just simple. By comparison, ask some of your buddies how much sweat they've built up after an hour-long race in AC in this era of cars, and you'll get a couple people admitting man, I'm fucking sweaty, how did this happen? The other thing I noticed when driving in a pack, and you've probably noticed it too just watching the footage, is there's no dirty air in this game. Any sort of high-powered open-wheel car with giant fucking wings on it, usually getting in someone's wake is kind of a problem, because you just end up losing the nose and, the wings stop working, which is not good at 250k. This was just admittedly not a problem ever when I was running in a pack, because like I said, I started 6, I had to work my way through the field and then catch up to Schumacher for about 10 laps, and it was not an issue driving behind anybody, which is not how these cars work. But let's be real here, that's a simple parameter tweak, and it's what a lot of devs implemented, in the games that came after F1 Challenge. Check this out, this is pretty cool. Early 2003, we get fully animated pit stops. It's slightly slow, F1 crews are a bit faster than this, but the fact that it's in there is it's cool. This is the kind of stuff that made people really like sim racing back in the day. It wasn't just, physics snobbery. It was man, when I pull into the pits, that's my actual crew in, the right uniforms, and they all work on the car and take the tires off. We don't have a lot of that in sim racing anymore. It took iRacing years to have, an animated pit crew, and that was, kind of promoted as, a big feature, 10 years after the game went live. You had PCARS 3 remove pit stops, Race Room and R-Factor 2 don't have animated pit stops. What they do have, however, is terrible backmarker AI. For whatever reason, the Sauber's not moving out of my way. He's not giving me the position. He turns in on me on the final corner, which is just bullshit. And, that's an issue we can still see today in a lot of modern racing sims, where for whatever reason the lap car AI does not understand what a blue flag is or how to get out of the way safely. This kind of shows you why I get irritated with modern racing sims, because this was a problem in games that I played when I was a small child, and I'm 30 this year, and it's still a problem, and no one has thought to fix this stuff. Again, I at least understand when I run into weird gremlins like that playing what's a retro game that, hasn't been touched in 20 years, but when I see the same in-engine issues occurring in stuff like R-Factor 2 or Project Cars 2, and it literally happens the same way, with the same twitchy steering, with the same AI indecisiveness, I get kind of pissed off because it's like, man, you have entire like teams dedicated to like stomping out these bugs, and everyone's known about them basically since they were a child, and you still didn't fix them. That's ridiculous. Anyways, Sector 2, white flag, 1 lap to go. The race is extremely lopsided. I opted for a 2-stop strategy because I thought I could just win the race on raw speed. Schumacher was just slightly faster on the 1-stop strategy, so I'm about 11 or 12 seconds behind, but everyone is running in their own zip code right now, and that's really how F1 races played out back in the day, especially during this era of Ferrari dominance, so it's somewhat accurate, I guess. Looking at the tire readouts, I really should have just opted for the 1-stop strategy because the tires are barely wearing. I opted for the softs, and they seem to hold up pretty well. But anyway, final sector, we've lost the race. We finished P2, which I believe is the actual running order of the 2000 Australian Grand Prix, so that's kind of neat. Yet, even though the checkered flag is in the air and the race is over, we are still not free from the typical ISI motor jank. My car just stops on the racing surface as I cross the start-finish line to end the race, and then when the AI takes control of my car, it drives into the wall. This is an issue in NASCAR 21 Ignition that we all laughed at and made fun of. It's here in F1 Challenge 99-02 some 20 years earlier. But regardless, at least this didn't fuck me out of the race because it happened, after the race was over. It just looks completely fucking retarded and probably should have been caught in testing, but whatever. It is what it is. It didn't fuck us over too badly. Schumacher wins, and now we are greeted with, a simple TV cam cool down lap that I'm not driving. It's just the AI piloting my car on the track, and we get to take in Albert Park for the last time. Great looking game, great driving game. The FFB is really not terrible. And we just finished a full race in a 20-year-old F1 sim, and it really didn't, give us any different of an experience than modern racing sims on the market. We spent all this time improving tire physics and graphics and sounds and force feedback, and in reality, we're really just playing an F1 Challenge mod because we had pretty much the same experience running classic F1 Challenge. Last comments about this game, going through the standings, nobody had a mechanical failure. It's kind of odd. Usually that happens in F1. It's kind of weird that everyone was still running at finish. Like, that's super rare. I will say, though, I love the UI in this game, even though it's kind of stretched with the 2560 by 1080 dimensions. The UI has a really timeless, futuristic design, and that's something EA was good about. They knew people would spend a lot of time in the menus, and, it's attractive. It looks good. But anyways, this is where modern sim racing started, really.